I mean, I'll just admit, being a fan of football, that I've really enjoyed watching Drake May. I mean, he's been so much fun to watch.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Finish Strong Friday, which means we've got our guy Greg Cosell back again. It also means it's not the last show of the week. We'll probably have some winners for you on the Saturday sit-down tomorrow, which a lot of people have really been enjoying. Just a long-form interview with someone about something in the sport of football. I got to give you my thoughts on last night's game. There is some news to get to, and certainly Greg Cosell is the featured attraction. Let's dive right into it.
The Big Show.
All right, Greg, today you are presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours, and we got a bunch to get to because we went long on some really cool games and concepts last week with expansive passing game for the Bills and the Vikings defense, and it was awesome. CJ Stroud, I loved it. If you didn't listen to or watch yesterday's show with Greg, make sure you do that. YouTube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, or you can find it on any of your podcast apps for sure. Let's start with this, with today's episode, Greg. Let's start with the Cleveland Browns and the New England Patriots. The Patriots are 5-2. Drake May's statistics are incredible.
Yeah.
The Browns coming off a big win over the Dolphins. They blew them out. What are you seeing or thinking in this one?
Well, I mean, I'll just admit, being a fan of football, that I've really enjoyed watching Drake May. I mean, he's been so much fun to watch. And, you know, it speaks to something I've always believed in, that when you have a young quarterback, I've always believed that you have to bring in a veteran NFL offensive coach with a resume. And, you know, Mike Vrabel is a very smart man, and he brought in Josh McDaniels. So now you're dealing with a coach that has a major resume, worked with arguably the best ever in Tom Brady, and now he's helping Drake May become an NFL quarterback. And May is playing with such calm, with such poise. He's so good on third down, which is very rare for a second-year quarterback without a lot of experience. He's been outstanding versus blitz. He's just a very comfortable player. And the thing that's really stood out, and this was a concern for a lot of people, including myself, when I did 2 years of his college tape, is his ball location. This is not talked about very much. His ball location is better than it ever was. And he's showing a trait, too, that I think is essential in the league. We know he's athletic and can run and make plays, but pocket movement, which is a different trait than scrambling and running out of the pocket, he's shown the ability to navigate the pocket, Ross, and keep his eyes downfield. So many quarterbacks, when they feel pressure and start to move, drop their eyes. I'm talking about the quarterbacks that obviously can move and run. He's keeping his eyes up, and he's making throws, moving within the pocket. He's just been a lot of fun to watch. But this is a really tough matchup. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like he's never going to have a bad game. Cleveland brings a lot on defense, and Jim Schwartz has been doing this a long time, and he is so highly respected, and he will have some tweaks and some little things that could well confuse Drake May. So this is not an easy matchup for a young quarterback.
You know, a couple thoughts, Greg. One is Mike Vrabel has already said this week that the Browns defense is the best one that his Patriots have gone against so far this year. And obviously what makes it even more interesting is Mike Vrabel was like a volunteer assistant coach for the Browns last year. So he was in the building working with defensive players, and obviously he has a lot of respect for Jim Schwartz, the way he goes about it. He knows a lot of their personnel. I wonder how much of an advantage that gives him. The other thing I was thinking about, Greg, just listening to you talk about having a veteran offensive coordinator with a major resume, it goes back to our conversation yesterday about C.J. Stroud.
Yeah.
He has not had that. You know, D'Amico Ryan has elected to go with back-to-back first-time coordinators in Bobby Slowick and Nick Caley, and and maybe obviously hasn't had the success. Although obviously Slowick
with
did great as a rookie.
and with somewhat different philosophies. So now he has to learn different things, and that's really hard to do. People aren't aware of how hard that is to do. So, we'll see how it plays out in Houston. Obviously, we talked about that yesterday, but clearly with Drake May, you're looking at a quarterback playing comfortably. But one thing Jim Schwartz does exceptionally well, and it's really subtle, but it's so good, is the way he changes the picture pre-snap to post-snap. But he doesn't do it in a dramatic way where, let's say, people are running all over the place. He does it in a very subtle way. So you're not sure, is that cover 2? Is that cover 3? You're not sure exactly what it is. And in this league for a quarterback, Ross, a half a beat of hesitation and the defense can win.
Well, that's all you're looking for. You're looking for any hesitation whatsoever. I got to tell you, by the way, Greg, prepping for last night's game between the Vikings and the Chargers, I obviously, which I will talk about later in the show, give you guys my recap. Watching the Colts offense against the Chargers, they are a machine, Greg. They are, their O-line is awesome. Shane Steichen, I was struck, Greg, by just how easy it looks. The Chargers were moving the ball at times too, but the Chargers moving the ball was like Justin Herbert hero ball. The Colts, it's like they're running their offense against no defense at times.
Well, I bet the play that got you excited because it got me excited, and I'm not even a former offensive lineman. Although I guess once an offensive lineman, you're always an offensive lineman. But the first touchdown by Taylor, which was kind of an outside zone run to the right side, and it required Nelson to make that backside cutoff block.
Yep.
That was as good a backside cutoff block as you'll ever see executed. I mean, it was sheer perfection. Those are hard blocks, as you know.
Yep, and what's so funny? You could see him in the camera angle from the back. He knew as soon as he got that block that what he had done and that it was going to be a touchdown.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure the listeners know, and the people watching on youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, what that means is Quentin Nelson is playing left guard, okay? And there's a defender in the gap between.
So basically a one technique, yeah.
Right, but people don't know what that means always, Greg. Yeah. So there's a defender in the gap between him and the center, right? So it's the A gap, it's called. In this case, the one technique, meaning he's on the center. That guy is responsible for that gap. He cannot let the running back go in between the left guard and the center. Well, Quentin Nelson was so quick off the ball and did such a good job getting his head across that he took over that gap. What does that mean? If every other Charger defender is doing what they're supposed to be and they're in their gap, there's nobody in the backside A gap because Quentin Nelson just took away the guy that's supposed to be there. That's where Taylor runs. That's how you have what looks like a huge hole. It's really just one guy losing his gap.
It was beautiful. I mean, just a quick aside, I remember listening to a podcast with Dante Scarnecchia maybe 2-3 years ago, and he talked about two things he really evaluates in college offensive guards, and he said front side reach blocks and backside cutoff blocks. He says if you can't do that in the run game in the NFL, you can't play.
Yep, and that is initial quickness off the ball. Yeah, I mean that's a big part of it. Okay, let's dive into how about the Cowboys and the Broncos. I mean, the Cowboys, speaking of a machine, their offense has been super impressive. And then the Broncos, 33 points in the fourth quarter. That was one of the wildest games in NFL history. This is a featured matchup on CBS I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, the Cowboys have been a really intriguing offense to watch. Their play action pass game, both under center and in the gun, is off the charts, Ross. I mean, I the way I do my work a lot is I don't necessarily look at numbers first. I watch the tape and then things strike me and I go, oh, let me see if the numbers reflect that. So I'm watching the Cowboys, and obviously I've watched them all year because their offense has been good. And now that they have CD Lamb back, it's going to be even better. And I'm watching their play action pass game and I'm going, this is a pretty good play action pass game. So I looked up the numbers. Dak Prescott, and I remember them off the top of my head because I look them up this week. Dak Prescott is 60 for 71 60 for 71. Think about that. That's like 85% in the play action pass game with 7 touchdowns and no picks. That's just in the play action pass game. Their play action pass game has been so phenomenal. And now that they have CeeDee Lamb back, because he's kind of their movement receiver, Pickens is their boundary X. And we saw that last week against Washington, critical moments into the first half. They throw to him versus Lattimore. When you have that receiver, that boundary X, it changes your whole offense. And now CeeDee Lamb becomes the movement guy to the wide side of the field. You can line him up in any different splits, locations, put him in motion. He can release different spots. It's really an interesting offense. And Jake Ferguson is another one of those tight ends. Not a superstar, but he's probably a lot better than people think.
Well, yeah, his numbers this year, Greg, have been unbelievable. He's averaging like 7 or 8 catches for 85 yards. I mean, he's got to be up there. He might be number 1 in the NFL in some stats for tight ends. Certainly he and Tyler Warren, the rookie for the Colts, have been way up there.
No
and
question.
You know what? That's a great position for a good play action passing game, Greg, because as you know, if the play action passing game's going well, that probably means the the linebackers and the safeties are getting a little nosy because they have to. They have to play run for the first second if they think it's a run, and that's when the tight end, who's usually the guy they're responsible for, they're covering, can really feast.
Yep, and that's why I've always believed that play action under center is more effective because it takes longer to get to the mesh point, so there's more hesitation by second-level defenders.
Oh, my gosh. You know what, Greg? I don't know that I've ever verbalized that like that, but if you watch any of my or listen to any of my games the rest of the year, that is what I'm going to say. Why? It's always interesting. Why is the under center play action so good? Because it takes longer for the defense to identify whether or not it's a runner.
Pass. Yeah, exactly.
Man, it sounds so simple, but not everybody does it. What are you seeing from the Broncos on the other side, Greg? I'm curious whether it's offense or defense for their matchup against the Cowboys.
And obviously they didn't, the Giants scored some points this week, clearly, but their defense is a difficult defense to play against. They're fast, they're explosive, they can cover on the back end. They lead the NFL in sacks again, and they did a year ago. They've got players up front that can win one-on-one, and one of the things they do really well, and I'll just explain this term really quick, is that they often gap you out up front, meaning that they put 5 guys up there so that you have to block one-on-one. They just gap you out. So, they can win. I mean, it's not just the edge guys, Benito and Cooper. Zach Allen is a stud inside. Franklin Myers can win one-on-one. They're just really good, and we know they can cover on the back end. And they've got some players that are not well-known names, like Brandon Jones, who's a really good safety.
All right, we got some juicy, and I have some other things I might get to you about with, because I'm curious about if we have time, the way Joe Flacco played or the Falcons, but they don't have a game. So let's make sure we get to these 2 huge primetime games. Packers and the Steelers, and maybe you'll talk about Flacco here with the way he lit up that Steelers defense. But what are you looking at? What interests you in the Sunday night matchup between the Steelers and the Packers?
Well, it's funny. These are 2 teams, and there's a little bit of a trend in the league with playing with multiple tight ends, and that's what these 2 teams do a lot of. And you look at the Packers, I mean, we mentioned Darnell Washington yesterday, and Darnell Washington has become a major force in their run game because he's another guy that can block tight ends one-on-one, and we saw how effective that was in their last game against the Bengals and how well they were able to get to the perimeter with Warren in the run game because of his ability to block defensive ends one-on-one. And that's been a big factor for them because, it's funny, in the pass game, I know everybody always wants to talk about Aaron Rodgers, and he's obviously been solid, and the numbers are pretty good, but they haven't really been a throw ball team. Their pass game has been, I would say, uneven's probably too strong, but it hasn't been the dominating feature that I think a lot of people thought with Aaron Rodgers. And if they can get their run game going a little bit, then I think it will really help. On the other side, the Packers, their defense has kind of settled in a little bit, and it's not been as good as it was early in the season. But offensively, The one thing I noticed with Jordan Love, and this is just growing up, he's only a third-year starter. People might forget that, Ross, but he's kind of settled in now to the point where, he may make one or two throws in a game where you go, oh, why are you doing that? But he's kind of settled into being a far more efficient player, taking shorter throws, letting the offense work for him as opposed to trying to force things down the field. And the last couple of weeks, the run game has sort of picked up with Josh Jacobs, who is as good a sustaining back as there is in the league. So in some ways now their offense has become more sustaining, even though they do have big playability.
That's interesting. It's funny because they have the best record in the NFC, and I don't know that it feels like it, Greg, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
4-1-1, but obviously they had a bye already, so that makes a difference. They are starting to get Micah Parsons closing games out.
Oh, that was
And talking with some of the Steelers coaches, I think they're trying because they have that young offensive line, and because I think Broderick Jones is probably still not what they were hoping he would be. I think
agree.
A lot of the quick passing game for the Steelers is to protect the offensive line. And
I would agree, yes.
You know what I love, Greg? I love when they go with not only Darnell Washington, but the extra O-lineman Spencer Anderson, 74.
Yeah.
Then that toss crack, like student body left, student body right, where they've got two 320-pound guys or whatever they are out there. I mean, they were hammering the Bengals with that at times.
No, you're exactly right. And I think you'll continue to see that because I think that will be a strength of their offense, because we know that Darnell Washington, that's the strength of his game. Even though he does have soft hands and can catch the ball, he's not a true tight receiver. Fryermuth is the guy. But every once in a while, you'll see Rodgers just make one of those Rodgers throws, like that first Fryermuth touchdown last week, that seam ball, that was, I think, in the high red zone. He just throws those balls so well.
We should probably talk about it now because I know a lot of where I live. I know a lot of Steelers fans, and they are very frustrated with how the Steelers defense played against Joe Flacco. Obviously, Jamar Chase was incredible in that game. They couldn't really figure out how to stop him. What did you see from the Steelers defense / Flacco and the Bengals offense, Greg?
Well, it's interesting because you watch them and we all think of Jalen Ramsey, obviously great player, all that, but Ramsey, they play him in multiple spots. I mean, they play him outside at times, they play him in the slot at times, and he played against the Bengals. He played 33 snaps at slot corner and 26 snaps at outside corner. He was the guy who got beat by Higgins on that last play, that set up the game-winning field goal. And Ramsey's been beat a bit when he's played on the outside this year as a man-to-man cover corner. And I think he's probably, at this point in his career, he's probably best as a slot corner. But depending on injuries, I know Slay missed some snaps in that last game. And Slay is also an older player as well. I mean, there was a play in that game where the Steelers on a third down clearly were bracketing Chase and Higgins, and Flacco, who's just seen everything, of course, just went right over the top to Yoshivas for 37 yards, matched one-on-one versus Slay. I mean, I think at times they're struggling on the back end.
Well, and you know what's crazy, Greg? Sometimes I wonder if receivers are really worth the money that like Jamar Chase gets. Watching that game, I'm a believer. I mean, he was getting 3 or 4 yards of separation almost every play. And then when they did go to bracket it, Yosivas is wide open. Or the Noah Fant touchdown, they were bracketing Chase, right? So it really, if they're going to bracket a player, Greg, you're taking away a middle of the field zone help defender.
Right. And the thing is the one thing about Flacco, and I know we were talking about the Steelers and the Packers, but just to mention Flacco is now you're dealing with a guy that's going to throw the football. Because one of the things I've always talked about with quarterbacks was, just as an aside, when I watch tape, and I've been doing it a long time, is what quarterbacks see as viable throws. There's a lot of quarterbacks that don't see certain throws that other quarterbacks will see as viable throws. That's a throw to make. Flacco has no issue with that. Flacco will make throws, and when I watch tape and see quarterbacks that are maybe young quarterbacks just coming up from college and where things are much more wide open because the field's different, and they have to learn what a viable throw is in the NFL. And we know that Joe Flacco has no issue with that.
And you're right, by the way, just watching the game. I mean, Slay and Ramsey, they could not cover Chase. And I think I said at one point during the game, I would just throw it to him every play. I mean, they couldn't cover him, and it wasn't even close. I mean, he was able to do – he had those guys in an absolute spin cycle during that game. Let's move on to the Monday Nighter. This Chiefs offense. Now they got Rashee Rice back. They look like a machine. They're going against a Commanders team that has already said they're going to have to start Marcus Mariota at quarterback.
Well, the thing that really stands out to me watching the Chiefs, and I know everybody says they're back, but I don't know if they ever went away. They've been in the last couple of Super Bowls, but when you watch their pass game now, and again, it's something you notice, and then I look at the stats, is it's so rhythmic now. In fact, Mahomes is, I believe, number one in the league in getting the ball out from snap to throw. It's the quickest amount of time, so it's very rhythmic now. So, people might say, and I've said it, they've got a lot of speed now, but they're not dropping back with deep drops and throwing the ball down the field. Now, that'll happen, I'm sure, at times in games. They'll attack downfield when they feel it's necessary. Who knows? Maybe they'll come out early and attack down the field. If this is a game, they could certainly do that. You've got a rookie corner in Amos who's actually played well for the Commanders. You've also got Lattimore, who's, by the way, struggling. He may well be past his prime, and they don't really use him as a matchup corner anymore. He plays right corner, and Amos plays left corner. But for the most part, this Chiefs passing game, they're back to a lot of their staple concepts. The ball's coming out quick. It's very rhythmic. And in fact, Rashee Rice is that kind of receiver because he's not a vertical burner. He's much more of a short to intermediate guy. So it would not surprise me to see Rice and Kelsey become bigger factors now since Rice is back.
Greg, they have a bye. So, I don't know how much you've watched. Oh, I take that back. They don't have a bye. The Falcons host the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
And I don't really care about the Miami Dolphins, but I know you watched Falcons and the Niners, and I guess I'm just curious. The Falcons, I don't know what the deal is with them. 1 week, they look like, oh my gosh, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Penix Jr., and then the next week, they look terrible. And it's happened all year. What is going on there?
I always feel, and I think we lose sight of this with a lot of people because a lot of things are opponent specific, Ross, and you know this. You're playing a specific opponent, and in that given game, let's talk about their defense, which I've loved watching this year, the Falcons defense, because they've been a heavy cover one team, a heavy blitz team, but they're not a big unit up front. So now they played a team in the Niners last week that came out and just played power physical football with an inside run game, and they got burned by it. So they couldn't get to a lot of their pressures. It turned out not to be a Mac Jones game. It turned out to be a McCaffrey game. So the way that given game played out, what they've been very, very good at through the early part of the season with all their pressure concepts, and I love what Jeff Ulbrich does with his pressure concepts, as good as anybody in the league, but the game didn't play out that way. And then, because of the nature of the game, and I can't speak to the reason this happened, but they totally got away from their run game. In a game that was close until late in the fourth quarter, Penix dropped back over 40 times and Bijan Robinson had 14 carries. So I can't explain that, but the game sort of snowballed on them, and I think they got away from what they do really well.
Check him out on social media. As you can tell, he is the man. These are very popular shows, Thursday and Friday, at Greg Cosell. We're at Ross Tucker Pod. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. Got to make sure you're subscribed, notifications on, so you don't miss Greg Cosell any week. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Ross.
All right, let's dive into the news. But first, do you know every single event going on in your area this weekend or next weekend or the weekend after that? You would if you had the Game Time app. I think it's the best curator of events that I've seen. And then when you actually see an event you like, all of the fees are included. They're not here for those bogus surprise fees at checkout. Plus, you guys know I love the lowest price guarantee and being able to see what the view's like from the seat. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ROSS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code ROSS for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. It's getting colder out there, which means it's time to drink more beer. Specifically, Labatt or Labatt Blue Light. Absolutely delicious. Hopefully you guys saw on social media at Ross Tucker NFL, I did that taste test recently. Rewards.labattusa.com is where it's at. Buy beer, get gear, the mini fridge amazing, the backpack cooler life-changing. Rewards.labattusa.com.
Tuck's Takes.
Well, it was absolute domination for the LA Chargers against the Vikings on Thursday night. Was not really expecting that. You know that the Vikings have O-line issues and that Carson Wentz did not perform well. But what happened to this Vikings defense? Other than Adam Redmond and Jonathan Grenard making some plays, they were powerless to stop any aspect of the LA Chargers. Kamani Vidal ran for over 100 yards and his first NFL touchdown. Seemed like everybody got involved in the passing game, including Arondé Gadsden and Ladd McConkey. And maybe most impressively, Justin Herbert was fantastic. Every aspect of the game. He did have that one interception, but he ran well, was terrific when he stepped up in the pocket throughout the game. Super impressed by this win for the Chargers. They now get a mini bye before they play the Titans. Meanwhile, for the Minnesota Vikings, it feels like it's going to be J.J. McCarthy time. At this point, it pretty much has to be.
All right, Ross, there's a lot of quarterback injury news. That includes presumptive Jets starting quarterback this week, Tyrod Taylor. He's day-to-day with a knee injury. And Marcus Mariota, he will officially get the start for the Commanders in Kansas City on Monday night.
So a couple interesting things there, and I highly encourage everyone to listen to or watch youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, yesterday's Even Money betting podcast, because that's where we have Dr. David Chow, longtime team orthopedic surgeon for the Chargers. He does not think Bryce Young will play, and he thinks Fields will start because Tyrod Taylor cannot practice fully, which I thought was interesting. We already know what the deal is in Washington with Mariota, but there's others to keep an eye on. Penix Jr., Lamar Jackson. We'll be following that over the next 48 hours.
Other news includes the Dolphins tight end Darren Waller. He's going on IR with a pec injury. The NFL is moving the Pro Bowl games to Tuesday's Super Bowl week. And my favorite story every year, Ravens veterans telling head coach John Harbaugh they want ping pong tables removed from the locker room. They're gone.
It's so funny because it does happen every year, one way or the other. They remove them, or a new coach comes in the offseason. He puts them in because he wants the guys hanging out together and spending more time together. Oh, man, I'm with you. That cracks me up every year. Hey, don't miss the Saturday sit-down. I'll give out some winners tomorrow, and we'll have an excellent interview just for you guys. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. We talk about winners on the Saturday sit-down. You're automatically a winner if you go ahead and make an order at myfrontpagestory.com. Just make sure you forward me the email receipt, ross@rosstucker.com. Pizza Boy Brewing, Sporticulture, HumanHeadNYC.com, BackOfficeScheduler.com.